Moscow. But I think it's very important to recognize it is in the U.S. national security interest and the Obama administration's interest to have these countries, whether it's China or Russia, be ruled by law and be compliant and be reliable partners. And what you see happening for sure in Russia is this culture of impunity really, it calls into question our ability to do things together that are in our national security interest.
So we're going to play something that President Medvedev said about Natalia's murder just in the summer. Listen.
The murder of our human rights activist, Estimirova, is of course a very sad event. For me, one thing is absolutely clear. Her murder is linked to her professional activities.
He's also stepped out and said that these things need to be addressed. Is this a chance? Is anybody actually jumping on this? And is this a real chance to get the authorities to do something about it or not?
It is a chance, but the investigation needs to stay at the level of the prosecutor general. It needs to never drop down to the regional level. And what he did after that statement was to impugn the integrity of people who suggested there might have been regional authorities involved. There needs to be an absolutely open investigation to all possibilities.
Well, I'm going to show you, when I was in Moscow and we were also investigating the human rights, the murders of a lot of journalists and activists, we went to the Glasnost Institute and we spoke to the director there, and he walked me along a wall. That's the memorial for at the funeral. But he walked me along a wall showing me one by one so many photos of journalists and other activists who've been killed, more than 200. And I asked him how many had been brought to account. He said maybe 5 that had even been investigated.
And this is a real hook, which I think President Dmitry Medvedev could be convinced is important. He is very much about anti-corruption, at least rhetorically. You can't, in the modern era, combat corruption if you don't have independent investigative journalists doing their job.
Can I turn to you, Tom, and ask you about Sudan, which I briefly mentioned? Look, Sudan, the president, al-Bashir, has been indicted by the International Criminal Court, and yet President Obama's envoy has been talking about cookies and gold stars. Let me just quote what he was quoted as saying. We've got to think about giving our cookies, kids, countries, they react to gold stars, smiley faces, handshakes, agreements, talks, and engagement. I mean, what is that?
It's a really dumb thing to say. To be fair to the administration here, they're undergoing a Sudan policy review, and they haven't announced their policy.
What do you think their policy will be? And what kind of signal does that kind of rhetoric from an envoy give?
It's very unfortunate. First of all, he's wrong. Governments like this are not children, and they don't react to cookies and gold stars. They act on their interests. And historically, as you know from experience from Bosnia to all the places where we have successfully defeated this kind of violence, governments respond to pressure. So it sends a signal that he sort of doesn't get that. It also is something that I think the government in Sudan would have been profoundly offended by. No one wants to be called a bunch of children. So he offended everybody by that statement, and I hope that the administration, when they announce their review, the policy is more mature and more grounded in realism than the envoy has suggested it might be.
What do you think it will be? Incentives without pressure?
Well, incentives without pressure don't work, because of course the ultimate incentive, the incentive that matters, is that pressure will be relieved. And for that incentive to be strong, the pressure has to be strong. That's the logic of that equation. So absolutely we should be talking to the Sudanese, we should be offering incentives, but they're not going to take it seriously unless the sanctions and the diplomatic pressure are particularly strong.
You've both worked on Guantanamo Bay. You've both had a lot to do with the solution, or trying to find a solution to all of this. You've spoken about how President Obama has tried to regain America's moral standing. And yet, Guantanamo Bay is not closed, and there's no date for it to be closed, and certain aspects of it continue. What is going to happen there?
Well, Tom and I think, both agree, as everybody does who's looked at this closely, it's an extremely difficult issue. And when we advanced the idea of a 12-month calendar, we meant 12 months. We meant 12 working months. It was wonderful that President Obama signed the executive order on January 22nd, but then the idea was that they needed to focus all attention on that and get good progress. I mean, it wasn't until May when we had Ambassador Daniel Fried, the diplomat who was going to go out and negotiate the release and transfer of various detainees who could be released. So they got a big bang, good approach in the beginning, and then it was a slow start. So it's not terribly surprising that we find ourselves 8 months in, and we're all hungry for more.
Tom, we talked a little bit about realpolitik, pragmatism. We've talked today just now about Russia and China. Obviously, those are countries that the Obama administration wants to bring in to help it with issues, for instance, Iran. And yet, are they getting bang for their buck?
Well, not that much yet on Iran and a lot of other issues. I would argue to them that you can get bang for your buck on the diplomatic issues where you need their support and still maintain a principled position on issues that the United States has cared about for a long time. And that there is a core national interest with respect to each of these countries in moving them towards greater respect for rule of law and accountability at home. We've got huge issues inside China, for example, on the environment. Well, good luck getting progress on environmental issues with China if regular people in China, don't have the ability through free newspapers and other free institutions to press their government to clean up its environmental progress.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Sorry to interrupt you, Tom. Thank you so much, Tom Malinowski and Sarah Mendelson.
Here in Pakistan, a flurry of militant